Hello Security Tube. In this video we will look at another DNS utility called Dnsrecon. So it's a Ruby script, so we'll have to use the Ruby interpreter, and once we run it, get to see that it's in version 1.5 and written by Carlos Perez. Now let's take the very first scan which it can help us run, which is nothing but a reverse lookup. So reverse DNS lookup is actually IP to DNS name resolution, and Dnsrecon allows us to give an entire range for the reverse DNS lookup. So let's go ahead and try this, and let's go ahead and use an IP range 202.141.80.6 to, let's say, 80.10. Now as you can clearly see, the reverse DNS lookup is now telling us that these 5 subdomains are actually hosted on the same IP address, which is 202.141.80.6, right? And the last two are actually hosted on different IP addresses, which is 80.9 and 80.10. So this is how we can figure out exactly how the various subdomains might be physically located on the same server using Dnsrecon and by doing a reverse DNS. Okay, so now what we will do is try and look at the next option, which is top level domain expansion. Now what is this? Well, if you really want to know exactly how a name, let's say security tube, forgot to give the option, how a name security tube resolves and has various domain names in various TLDs such as com, org, UK, etc., then the hyphen TLD is the option. Now if you notice, we are seeing something interesting, that there is one unique address, securitydube.net, which is fine, and all the others are pointing to the same IP address. Right, now this could be due to multiple reasons. One is probably that, you know, there's some domain squatter who's bought all the domains and pointing his to his server. The other is that depending on the DNS which you are using, for example, I'm using OpenDNS in my resolve.conf, it might just be redirecting you for all unknown domains towards its search page. So anyway, this is a good way to figure out exactly what are the different top level TLDs given a name. So now the next thing which we look at is DNS host and domain brute forcing. So this is where what I've found is that Dnsrecon doesn't really work too well. So what we'll do is, if you remember, we had used Fierce, another domain name utility in a previous video, to try and find the various subdomains of mail.ru using a dictionary based attack. Now let's try the same using Dnsrecon and give it hosts.txt. So if you notice now, there are a lot of IP addresses which are coming up for various subdomains. The funny thing is, all of them seem to be pointing to the same IP address. Now if you watch the previous videos on DNS, you probably already understood that this is nothing but the fact that wildcards have been enabled in subdomain DNS resolution. What does that mean? All non-existent subdomains will automatically point to the original domain name. So all of these domains actually point to mail.ru, which means wildcards are on. Now the problem with Dnsrecon is that it's not able to figure that out. So this is one of the drawbacks of the tool. Just to prove the point, let me actually, if you look, it's a lot of arbitrarily looking subdomains. Let's go ahead and use dig, just give a random subdomain for mail.ru and check what is the IP address. Now if you see, this is exactly the same IP address which we found before, and this proves that wildcards have been enabled in DNS resolution. So now what we can do is probably try and give it a different brute force set. Now this is where we are using some knowledge which we already have, for example videos, thumbnails, JS, some of the subdomains of securitytube.net. Now let's remove hosts.txt, instead give it brute.txt. Let's see what the response is. So what we found is that all 4 of them resolved. But here is where the interesting part is. Video.securitytube.net actually doesn't exist, in the sense that I never created that subdomain. But still it is resolving to securitytube.net's IP address simply because wildcards have been enabled. Now I'll show you a quick technique of how, even though Dnsrecon itself cannot figure out wildcards, we can figure out and weed out all those unnecessary entries. Simple test she can do is by using the dig utility and running it on some arbitrary subdomain of securitytube.net and seeing what it resolves to. If you notice, this is the IP address. That is the securitytube.net's IP address. Now let's run the previous command again, and what you will notice is that only one of these has that IP address of securitytube.net, which is basically video.securitytube.net, and all the others, which is thumbnails, videos and JS subdomain, point to a different IP address. Right? So with this very simple test, we were able to figure out which of the subdomains actually exist and which of them are a result of wildcards being enabled. So by default, however, remember that Dnsrecon cannot differentiate between both. Okay, now let's look at the next one, which is DNS query for NS, SOA and MX records. Now this is fairly straightforward. You can do it even with dig, but let's just do this for the sake of completeness. So -s option, and as we can see, we get the A record, the SOA, and then the name servers, and then finally the mail exchanger, which is the mail server. This was simple enough, no big black magic in this. Now let's actually look at the next one, which is zone transfer. This was interesting. We've covered zone transfers in a lot of other videos about domain names utilities. Now this is where I found something interesting during my tests, is that of course for securitytube.net zone transfers aren't allowed, and basically we get the failed. However, if you've been watching previous videos, zone transfer was enabled on iitg.ornet.in, but as you will see, okay, for Luit it wasn't, but for the other name server, Dnsrecon tries. Still waiting for it. It's trying to query. Oops, here it goes. So what we see is a very stupid error which comes here, that zone transfer failed or something went wrong. Now the funny thing is that on iitg.ornet.in, the second name server actually was misconfigured and you could actually do a zone transfer, but for some reason Dnsrecon is failing. I would advise using fierce and DNSenum, which actually worked, and there actually is the previous videos and you can find them in the related videos below. Okay, so let's continue. Now let's look at the last option, which is for SRV records. Now, SRV are special records, generally for custom services such as SIP servers and VoIP infrastructures, etc. And generally, you will not find hosts which have SRV records. So unfortunately, I couldn't find a host for which I could show you something compelling. So Dnsrecon is just going to exit. So if you find a host for which you find SRV records, then please post it in the comments below, so that the users and viewers of the video can try it out. Okay, well, so that's all for this video. Try out Dnsrecon. It's a nice nifty tool. A couple of things didn't work, but probably it's just me, so try it out. It might just work for you. And I guess thanks for watching, and I would really appreciate if you can leave a comment behind, because that will keep me encouraged to make more videos. That's all for this video. Thank you.